Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today we're joined by the wonderful Mia McKenna-Bruce to talk all about her movie Persuasion. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about a little bit was some of the initial audition process, because you did a self-tape for the role to start off with, but then very early on had a Zoom with the director, Kerry Cracknell, in which it sounds like you actually had the opportunity to also talk about the character quite a lot during that time. And so I was so interested in what were some of the most important facets that you really saw being important to your performance that you were discussing with Kerry during that early conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we spoke about was kind of the dynamic of being one of three sisters, which I am in real life as well. I'm the oldest, not the youngest. But that was kind of the first thing that came up and was like really kind of, it was kind of like it started there with this relationship between the three sisters. Obviously, it's like this extreme relationship. But I was straight away like, I've got a younger sister that is very overdramatic. So I can totally relate to this straight away. And then we kind of went into, when I first read Mary, I am a huge Schitt's Creek fan. And I was like, this is like Moira Rose if she was in a Jane Austen's novel. And then Carrie was just like, oh my gosh. So it kind of just went from there. And then, yeah, it was just kind of unpacking the fact that even though Mary is super like extreme, she believes what she's saying. She's still a real character in that world. So it was kind of also understanding that, you know, she was a real human being in that world. She does exist.
Right. I love that description that like everything she's saying, she fully believes. And for you, did that transcend? Because one of the things is her constantly coming up with ailments that clearly aren't real. But for you, did you think that every single time there's an ailment for her, that she fully believes that that's actually true?
Yeah. And we definitely spoke about that as well. Like, is she, especially I think where she's first introduced in that first scene, she's like, I'm on the verge of death. And there was quite a lot of conversation about, does she genuinely feel like she's going to die? Or is it like, I'm on the verge of death and I want you to do something? Like, is she doing it for other people? And we got to the conclusion that, you know, she is quite self-aware. She does know that she's dramatic. And there is a line in it that I think Dakota does say where she says, oh, shockingly self-aware. But she does actually, that's her version of death. Like, she is like, I'm on the brink of death, and she believes that. So yeah, she wholeheartedly believes everything she's saying.
How did you find
it makes it better or worse?
Probably both.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's where a lot of the comedy comes from in the delivery of your performance, is that kind of steadfastness. No, I genuinely think I'm on the verge of death, and this is very real to me. How did you kind of approach finding the comedic sensibility of your performance in that way? Because I know this is also one of the first very comedic roles that you've played as well.
Yeah. So I didn't really realize that she was the like comedy character. I obviously knew, you know, she was funny, but I didn't quite realize to what extent. And I think that kind of played a part in it as well, because I wasn't kind of trying to be comedic with it. It was, like I say, finding the like how real it was to Mary. And that's what kind of made it funny from there, I think. And also like just being surrounded by the others who were also hilarious. And we had a great dynamic on set and stuff like that. So I mean, I get really overexcited and hyper quite a lot of the time. And it was kind of that, like, we just had so much fun. We had time to rehearse. Carrie was just phenomenal in giving us that space to kind of try things out and stuff like that. So it was kind of just running with it and seeing what happened, I think.
And I love it that in conversation that her narcissism is to such a degree that she doesn't even stop to pay attention. Is the other person listening? Are they engaged? Are they even speaking English? And so how did you kind of find the rhythm and the pacing of the dialogue and the delivery in that way, where it is just kind of this very one-sided, fast-paced monologue?
Yeah, it was quite hard because, like you say, it's like, she's not waiting for a response. She's not, or even if she is stopping for breath, she doesn't care what the response is. So it's like she's not necessarily bouncing off what the other person says or anything like that, which is something that I really like to do when I'm acting, is really like kind of, you know, put your energy into the other person and take what they give you. So that was quite hard getting to grips with that. But it was almost having like a constant internal dialogue the whole time, especially there's the scene where Anne is talking to Mary in Italian. And I was like, how am I not like processing that she's speaking another language? Like I really couldn't get my head around it for a while. But then it was just kind of answering my own questions in my head and not kind of paying attention to what anyone else was saying. So it was almost like, yeah, just running my own scenes in my head over and over again, I think.
And how did that also change even just the way that you're looking at other people in scenes and watching them? Because again, it's not about the engagement in the conversation. It's more kind of, I only need to pay attention if it's about me.
Yeah, literally. So I'd only kind of, I kind of made a decision that like, I would only look at people if I'm, like you say, it was about Mary, or if it was kind of like, there was a few lines I had, where Anne would say something, and then she'd be like, oh, Anne, like question what Anne was doing. At that point, I was like, okay, she's kind of interested in Anne at that point. But apart from that, it was kind of just, again, like just going off this own kind of scene that I'd sort of written in my head. Like if we were outside, it was focusing on, oh, that I don't like the look of that tree, or this grass is itching me, or something like that. That's nothing to do with the other characters, because she has to be so self-absorbed in her own world, which is something that I'm really not good at. Like I'm super kind of involved and all of that. So it was kind of, yeah, finding these other things that I had to put my focus on, I think.
And then you've got her dad in the film as well, who's a real narcissist as well, you know, has paintings of himself everywhere, loves reflective surfaces because he can see himself, you know, played brilliantly by Richard E. Grant. And so for you, how much of what you were bringing into the character did you view as aspects which kind of stemmed from being raised by a dad that's in that way? Obviously, you know, we don't really know if that was their mom's dynamic, but we definitely see it in the father in the film.
Yeah, I think so I didn't actually get to see any, I wasn't really in any scenes with Richard at all. And we didn't get to do the rehearsals together because we did like the scenes that we were shooting in rehearsals. So I didn't get to actually see what he was kind of doing with the character, apart from when we did a read through on Zoom, obviously COVID. So I got to see what he did with it there. But apart from that, I didn't really get to see where he was going with it. So it was all on the writing. And somehow we managed to get this, I think because the writing is so brilliant, did manage to get this kind of flow where we both had a similar kind of energy. And I think like it does come from that narcissism thing, and she's in the writing, it's kind of like he, like you say, the reflective surfaces and being very vain and all of that. I think, yeah, it was just kind of playing with all those sort of aspects of it. And then, like you say, we didn't know much about the mum, but I think their mum was probably not on that level at all.
And with the rehearsal process, what were some of the key components or elements of character or particular scenes that really came out of that process for you?
I think one of the main things was actually the physicality of, first of all, Mary, because she was very conscious and upright and all of that, but also having to stand in a specific way for the period. We had quite a few dinner scenes, so we had to learn where to hold a glass or how to use the cutlery, or you know, the elbows not on the table. And then we were also wearing corsets, so we kind of had to learn slightly, there's like a different breathing pattern that you have to do, and you have to put your weight, I can't really remember now, I think it's like you shift your weight onto your the heels of your foot or something like that. Like it was all really complicated. So loads of that came from the rehearsals, definitely, because there were bits that kind of you don't really realize until you get into the rehearsal space, and it's like, oh yeah, we're actually doing something in the 1800s as well. On top of being a total narcissist, I've got to like stand with my back completely straight and all of that.
And was the rehearsal process more about going through scenes and kind of like playing around with different possibilities performance wise, or more about the discussion around certain scenes or certain choices and characters?
It was a bit of both. I think it depended on what scenes we were rehearsing, because some of the bigger scenes where there was a group of us, so the dinner scenes, or you didn't get to see much of it in the film, but we had like 2 dance scenes, I think. So in those, it was very much about choreographing those scenes and making sure they flow on the day. Because with the dinner table scene where Anne can't sit down, that took quite a while to kind of choreograph where she was going to sit, who was going to sit there, and make sure we got there on time so that she wasn't waiting and could take the seat. So all of those ones were quite rehearsals of the physicality of the scene. And then when we were doing the more still scenes with less people in them, that's when we'd have the discussions about character and kind of go a lot deeper into the scene, I think.
And there's so many great ensemble scenes where so many of you get to be together in one space. And so for you, what was that trajectory and space that you wanted to play within Mary in those moments where she's maybe not, you know, in the center of a conversation, but she's still on the periphery in terms of like how she's watching people or what she's paying attention to and where her head's at?
Yeah, I mean, I think in group situations, obviously, everyone else in that situation is so aware of Mary at this point, and they kind of just leave her to her own devices. So we did actually, again, this didn't get into the film, I don't think, but we did actually during a dinner scene where everyone was there and the focus wasn't on Mary at all. So we played with Mary actually falling asleep at the table, because obviously she's like, no one's interested in me, I'm not interested in anyone else. So we did kind of film a part of it where she just fell asleep and was just completely out of it. So I think even in those group situations, it is, okay, anything interesting me? No, okay, then I'm not part of it. It's that kind of thing. And again, just playing with that I'm in my own world kind of thing.
And is for you, were elements like, okay, people are going on a walk and I don't want to go on a walk and I clearly hate doing this because last time, you know, I made people carry me back, but now I'm going to do it again and now my husband's going to carry me back. Was that for, you know, for you, did that kind of stem from like, I want to go in case they're talking about me, or I want to make sure that they're not saying anything behind my back for her? Yeah,
I think I took it as just total FOMO. It's, you're doing something, I need to be a part of it, and I don't care what it is. That's what I think it was. I think they could have turned around and said they were, you know, cleaning up horse muck or something, but if everyone else was doing it and Mary wasn't, she had to be there.
Yeah. And you were talking a little bit before about the costumes. You know, how much did that help you find your way into the character once you were on set and once you kind of like even just went into fittings for costumes, especially from like what you were saying about the physicality of how that makes you stand and hold yourself?
Yeah, it helps so much. I mean, it's so hard to put on these costumes and be on these beautiful locations and sets and everything and not kind of feel like you're in that world. There were so many times we'd be sat in the green room and we just look at each other and laugh and be like we're literally just dressing up, like it's hilarious, this is what we do for a living. So it's kind of, it's so, also we'd just come out of COVID, so it was the first time we were around people again, and so when we were doing those dinner scenes and stuff like that, it kind of felt like we were actually out for dinner, because I kind of forgot what it felt like to actually just go out for dinner like normally. So yeah, it does really help just getting wrapped up in that world completely. And especially when you've got a corset on, because you can't help but, especially for Mary, you can't help but kind of sit there upright. And in that first scene when she's laying down, it is hard to have to move around. So that kind of made my job a lot easier, because it was actually a lot of ag to have to sit up and move around in a corset.
She's also so incredibly blunt in the things that she says to people, the assertions she makes. You know, it's like, oh, why were you playing those sad plunky songs on the piano? Yeah. You know, it was miserable and I hated it. Do you think that she has any awareness of the way that she's addressing people, or kind of ever views that there would be repercussions? Or do you think she's just been able to operate in that way for so long that it doesn't kind of affect her?
I think she's aware of herself. I think she's aware of how she is, but it has been enabled. Like, she's got away with it. She's never had to deal with any consequences. She's married with children, which was the expectation of her at that time. So, you know, she carried on. And I think she resented quite a lot that she was kind of had to be a woman in that time who was married with children, and she didn't want to be. So she was like, you're making me do something I don't want to do, so I'm just going to be whoever I want to be and say whatever I want to say.
Right. She's got very outward opinions about her place as a mother and her relationship with her children. What were some of kind of like the aspects that you loved getting to explore in terms of who she is as a mother? And like, you know, did it very much come from what you were just saying about the resentment of what she had to be for society?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, the boys that played our kids, which was gorgeous as well. So it was really hard to be like, I don't care about these. So it definitely did kind of, for me, come from a place of, this is resentment because this isn't what she wanted and it's what she had to do. So that's kind of where I found that from, because otherwise it's just finding, you know, and Ben, who played Charles, was amazing as well, and we all got on so well, and I was like, I have to hate you all, really. Which didn't come easy.
It also seems like she probably has a lot of insecurities, and even within her marriage, you know, knowing that he liked her sister first and, you know, she was kind of the second choice, so to speak. What for you were like the biggest things that what for you were like the biggest,
just that thing, and she has to, like, that was it was like, oh, he doesn't want her, he has to settle for Mary.
And for you, like, what were the biggest characteristics and traits that stemmed from insecurities, or what were the biggest insecurities that you saw in her?
I think definitely the way she would address Anne quite a lot. The scene where she says, Wentworth isn't very gallant to you. She like refers to Wentworth saying she looks old. And I think stuff like that, she kind of has to make Anne aware that someone doesn't think she's that great, because Mary doesn't feel that great, or someone isn't complimenting Mary, they're talking about Anne. So she needs to make sure everyone's aware that they're not saying good things about Anne. And, or when Louisa falls and it's Anne can say, and then Mary's like, why Anne, when she doesn't mean anything to Louisa? Like, I'm the important one, I have to be important. So I think maybe being the youngest felt like she was going to be pushed to the side, and so she kind of felt like she had to drive her way in, and hasn't kind of put any boundaries on that. She's just bulldozering through.
And were there challenges that came with a character that, you know, does have so many of these very heightened elements? You know, again, I can talk and someone's talking in Italian and I'm not even going to notice, is quite a heightened behavior. And yet to still kind of find elements that would make her feel grounded and like a real person at the same time.
Yeah, I think it was hard. Not even hard to kind of, when we were actually doing the scenes, I think by that point, it just flowed, and everyone, you know, it all just worked and fit perfectly together. But when I initially auditioned, I was like, how do I do this? And I've never really done comedy before. And I've always, like I kind of touched on earlier, I kind of always like to bounce off the other person in the scene. And Mary doesn't do that. So it was really like, how do I even begin to approach this? But it was kind of just trusting the writing and going, okay, she is this person, she believes this, so let's go for it. It was kind of just going all in with it, I think.
Yeah. And you've described how working on this film was such a great kind of learning experience, even just from getting to watch the rest of the cast and work alongside them in scenes. What were some of the things that you really found yourself observing in some of the other cast, or things that you learned from watching them?
I think just enjoying what you're doing so much as well, you know, getting to work with people that have been in the industry for so long and worked on so many different things and have had so many different experiences, and still turning up and loving what they do is really amazing to see, and really really like reassuring in a way that, like, oh, it is always exciting, because every job I go on feels so different and feels so new. And then so seeing these kind of amazing, really long-term actors still in that place is really great to see.
Yeah. And with the fact that you were just saying that every single project that you do feels very different and feels very new, what were the aspects that felt very new, or kind of like different challenges on this particular project with this character?
Definitely the comedy. Definitely the comedy, and also the lines for me, because we had to kind of stick to the script as much as possible, because obviously a lot of the dialogue is period dialogue, whereas I'm quite used to kind of ad-libbing around lines and stuff like that. So it was kind of having to learn stuff word for word was quite difficult for me as well. And then also coming out of COVID and shooting during COVID was really tough, because that whole aspect of really getting to hang out as a cast and crew, we didn't really get to do because there were so many restrictions in place. I mean, we were grateful because it meant we could work, but it did add a whole new kind of environment to what we were doing. So that was definitely a challenge, but that was also amazing and a learning experience in its own right.
Yeah. Well, with the challenge of the comedy, it's something that you definitely landed in your performance. So congratulations on everything with the film and with this character. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.